Hello and welcome to episode 2 of my US GeoGuessr tips series. Today's episode is all about license plates. In the first episode, which focused on broad and basic tips, I briefly mentioned license plates. Today we are going all in and discussing how to recognize each state's most common license plates while blurred, as well as general tips for using license plates and other useful tricks. So let's begin. I went over front plate laws in the basics episode, but we'll talk about them again now, since this is a critical rule for license plates. Some states require plates on both the front and back of vehicles, but others just require plates on the back. Knowing the law in each state can sometimes be the deciding factor in where you guess. In general, southern states do not require front plates, while northern states do. It's the exceptions to this rule that are the most useful, such as deciding between Michigan or Wisconsin. If you're in a round that you're pretty sure is in that area, you can rule out Michigan if most cars have front plates, since cars in Michigan do not need to have them. There are so many other similar situations, so make sure to memorize this useful map. Never take license plates at face value. It's usually a good idea to look at multiple license plates if you can, just for security. Another absolutely critical component to license plate identification is using landscape and other context clues. Since many plates can look similar to each other, try to identify the region of the country based on landscape first, and then you'll have a much smaller list of plates to choose from. Great examples of situations where this is useful include Alaska versus New York plates, or Connecticut versus Illinois plates. In short, always look for multiple plates, and always use landscape to narrow down your options. License plates are obviously visible in all of the camera generations, but they are significantly easier to identify in Generation 4 coverage, which refers to coverage taken by Google's newest Street View cameras. This camera has a high contrast and vibrant colors, which can make recognizing plates a little easier. And obviously, it's still very possible to recognize license plates in Gen 3 or even Gen 2 coverage. It just takes practice. For this part of the episode, I'll be focusing on the main most common plates for each state. Keep in mind that plenty of states have alternate designs for certain purposes, cars with old plates, cars that aren't following the front plate law, and so on. We've got a lot to cover, so I'll try to keep things as brief yet informative as possible. Here we go! Alabama's main license plate is this colorful mountain and lake scene. When it gets blurred out, it's very distinct, appearing yellow, green, and blue from top to bottom. This plate was introduced in 2014, so older coverage will likely not have it visible. From 2009 to 2014, this plate was used, and before that, the plates were much less colorful. This can make Alabama a little tricky, but since the new plates have been around for over 7 years, you'll usually see those. Alaska has 3 plates that you'll see most often. The standard Alaska plate is this yellow one. When blurred out, it just looks yellow, so be careful not to confuse it with New York's plate. There's also this specialty Gold Rush license plate, which when blurred out appears like this. Alaska also has this newer alternate plate featuring a bear, snow, blue sky, and sun. Blurred out, it looks like this. Arizona is a pretty straightforward one. Its main license plate is a desert scene, which is quite distinctive when blurred. I find that the most distinctive feature is the purple blur in the bottom left corner. Arkansas has this pale blue and white license plate with red and blue text. It can be pretty tricky to identify when blurred out, and it's kind of similar to North Carolina's license plate. I've mixed up the two more times than I'd like to admit. Lots of Arkansas's specialty plates use a similar design to the standard one, so most in the state should look something like this blur. California has a simple white plate with red text at the top. It doesn't look too distinct when blurred, except for the red at the top. This has been the standard design since the 80s. On rare occasions, you can see old California license plates, especially the black and gold ones. Colorado also has a simple plate design with white mountains on a green background. These plates can be kind of tricky to spot, but your best bet is to look for the dark green section at the top. Additionally, lots of Colorado's non-passenger vehicles have the same design but in red. Connecticut's plates are a blue and white gradient, and this is an easy pattern to spot when blurred out. As I mentioned earlier, be careful not to confuse them with Illinois plates. Delaware has been using more or less the same design since 1962, and their plates are a rather distinctive dark navy blue with gold text. When blurred out, they almost appear black with gold text, but in any case, they're very distinct, especially combined with Delaware's lack of front plates. Florida's license plate is another pretty recognizable one, featuring a green Florida silhouette and an orange in the middle. It looks like this blurred out. Georgia has two license plates that you'll commonly see on Street View these days. First is the current license plate, which has a blue, white, and peach-colored sky above a green landscape. It's also got peaches in the bottom corners. This one is pretty distinct when blurred out, but it can look similar to one of South Carolina's plates when blurred, so be extra careful. Before 2012, Georgia had these much simpler white plates with a peach outline in the middle. You can sometimes make out the orange center on the plate when it's blurred, and that's the best way to recognize it. But don't confuse it with these slightly similar Florida plates. Hawaii is already a pretty distinctive state just by its landscape, but its license plates are somewhat recognizable. They're white with a rainbow going across, and this design has been used since 1991. Blurred out, it can sometimes be tricky to spot since it's mostly white, but you can catch a glimpse of the rainbow usually. Idaho has got very distinct license plates, and the design has been around since 1991. It has a red and white sky with blue trees and mountains at the bottom. It looks like this blurred out, but make sure to not confuse it with this Ohio license plate. Illinois has two common license plates on Street View. The newest Illinois plate that's been in use since 2017 is this one, featuring a blue sky and white outline of the Chicago and Springfield skylines. Abe Lincoln is on the left in gray. It looks like this blurred out. A good way to tell it apart from the Connecticut plate is the red text, which is usually visible. Before 2017, Illinois had these plates with a small blue gradient at the bottom and Lincoln in the blue in middle. This plate looks like this when blurred. Indiana is one of the more complicated states for license plates. I still struggle with Indiana plates more than almost any other state. The current design, issued in 2017, has a covered bridge seen at the bottom with a blue gradient sky. It's usually recognizable when blurred, but it can sometimes look like an Iowa or Minnesota plate, so be careful. From 2013 to 2017, the standard plate was this one, honoring Indiana's bicentennial. I honestly can't recall ever using this plate to identify Indiana, but it looks like this blurred out. Before 2013, Indiana plates were a solid dark blue, which is easy to spot, but these are not very common anymore. Lastly, since 2012, Indiana has offered this In God We Trust plate featuring an American flag background. I see this one around a lot, almost more than the standard plate. When it's blurred out, the blue part on the left is the most distinctive. Don't confuse it with this Oklahoma plate though. Iowa recently updated its license plates in 2018 to this blue, white, and yellow plate. It looks like this when blurred out, which is somewhat similar to the Pennsylvania plate and the Alaska Gold Rush plate. Before 2018, Iowa had this plate with a white farmland scene and blue at the top. Here it is blurred out. I most commonly confuse this plate with Minnesota, and it doesn't help that these states can look very alike. Kansas has a pale blue license plate with its state seal in white at the bottom right. It can be tough to see when blurred out, but make sure you look for the patch of white at the bottom right. It can look a little bit like the new Oklahoma plate, but Oklahoma has a more vibrant blue color. Kentucky's license plates have used a design like this since 2005, featuring a deep blue gradient and blue text. In 2020, the little Kentucky outline was moved to the left side of the plate. The plate appears like this when blurred out. Be careful not to confuse it with this Michigan plate or the older Illinois plate. Louisiana had a fairly recent plate update in 2016, introducing a yellow, orange, and white gradient with a pelican in the middle. Despite the colors, it can be tricky to spot, and I still have some trouble doing so. Before 2016, the plates were a simple white design with blue trim and text, and these are extremely difficult to recognize. Maine's Maine license plate has looked like this since 1999, featuring green pine trees at the bottom and a chickadee and pine cone on the left. This is another somewhat tricky plate to identify when blurred, but keep an eye out for green on the bottom and left. Maryland has two commonly spotted license plates on Street View. First is this current one, introduced in 2016, which has the state flag at the bottom. This shows up pretty well when blurred and is a distinctive design. From 2010 to 2016, the Maryland plate was a War of 1812 commemorative design, with a red Fort McHenry in the bottom left and a blue stripe at the bottom. When blurred, I look for the red in the bottom left corner. Massachusetts has used this simple design since 1993, with red and blue text. This is another slightly tricky one to see when blurred, but the red text is usually visible and it's pretty distinct too. Michigan is another complicated case with several common license plates. The current standard plate in use since 2013 has blue text and a blue wave at the bottom. The blue shows up well when blurred. From 2007 to 2013, the plate was basically inverted with a blue stripe at the top. Blurred out, it looks like this. There are also two optional plates which are fairly common, first being this green, white, and blue design that looks like this when blurred, as well as this Mackinac Bridge plate with an orange sunset background that looks like this when blurred out. Thankfully, Michigan's plates are pretty recognizable and distinct. There are just a lot to look for. Minnesota's license plate has looked pretty much like this since 1978. Today, the plate has blue at the top and bottom with a white center. Blurred out, it looks like this, but as I've touched on before, be careful not to confuse it with Iowa's old plate. Make sure to look for the blue stripe at the bottom too. Mississippi is a tricky state for plates in my opinion, and it's my personal worst state in terms of recognizing the plates. In 2019, the state got a new design, which is largely a yellowish gold color with dark text. Since this plate is pretty new, it isn't too common yet, especially since lots of Mississippi is stuck in older Generation 3 coverage. You'll mostly find the 2012 to 2019 plate, which is pale blue and white with a guitar in the center. This is pretty tricky to see when blurred, and I struggle with identifying it a lot. Before 2012, this lighthouse design was used, and this one is a little more distinguishable when blurred out. Missouri updated its plates in 2018. The new design has thin red and blue waves at the top and bottom on a white field. The registration sticker in the middle of the plate is also very distinct. Blurred out, it looks like this. Don't confuse it with Idaho or the old Ohio plates. The pre-2018 plates are still very common. These have the sticker in the middle, but also have a pale blue and white gradient. Blurred out, it looks like this. Keep in mind that these sticker colors vary. Montana, yet another tricky state for plates. The standard plate used since 2010 is a solid dark blue plate with white text and a white outline of Montana. It looks blue when blurred out, no surprise there. The optional standard plates are also very common in Montana. There's this light blue and white plate with yellow at the top, which looks like this when blurred. Another similar variant looks like this, and here it is blurred out. Nebraska has two frequently seen plates. 2017 saw the introduction of the current plate, a white plate with a blue stripe at the top. Blurred out, it looks like this, which is extremely similar to the West Virginia plate, so be careful. Before 2017, the standard plate was this yellow and white bird and flower design, which looks like this when blurred out. Nevada also has two common plates, but they're rather similar. The current one has a pale blue sky with colorful mountains at the bottom, and looks like this when blurred. The older plate is also mostly blue, but has a yellow sky at the top, and looks like this blurred out. New Hampshire is the first straightforward state in what feels like a while. Its plate has looked like this since 1999, featuring a distinct Old Man of the Mountain background. Blurred out, it looks like this, and the green blur on the right is the most unique feature. New Jersey is also very straightforward and distinct with its plates. Since the early 90s, Jersey has had these pale yellow plates that look pale yellow when blurred. New Mexico plates are also highly distinct. The standard plate has been bright yellow with red text for a very long time, and looks like this when blurred out. Beginning in 2010, this solid turquoise plate celebrating the bicentennial was offered, and is very unique when blurred out as well. New York is another state with yellow plates galore. The license plate of the 2010s was the iconic dark yellow plate with a navy blue stripe at the top. Very distinct when blurred, and you can usually see the navy stripe too. Before 2010, this blue and white design was used, which looks like this when blurred. You can still see this plate quite a bit on Street View. Lastly, in 2020, New York updated their plates again. They look like this. They are not very common on Street View yet, but they look like this when blurred out. In a few years, those iconic yellow plates will sadly become much less common. North Carolina has three standard options for license plates. They have slight differences, but they more or less look the same when blurred out. Here's what they all look like generally when blurred out. As I mentioned earlier, don't confuse it with Arkansas. North Dakota's new license plate from 2016 on is this picturesque buffalo scene, which looks like this when blurred out. Don't confuse it with the new Nevada plates. Before 2016, the plate was pretty similar, but the blue was less vibrant and the bottom is yellow instead. Here it is blurred out on Street View. Ohio has a good number of plates to memorize. Since 2013, this simple plate has been the standard with a red triangle at the top. Blurred out, it looks like this. Don't confuse it with the Wisconsin plate though. From 2010 to 2013, this farmland scene was used and looks like this when blurred out. I find the yellow to be the most distinguishable feature. Before 2010, plates had red and blue stripes, which look something like this when blurred out, and again is pretty similar to the Idaho and New Missouri plates. Oklahoma's two common plates on Street View are both rather distinct. The new one features a white flycatcher silhouette on a blue background, which looks like this when blurred out. Before 2016, the plate had a Native American warrior on the left side, and when blurred out, it looks like this, quite similar to the In God We Trust Indiana plate, and I've confused the two way too many times. Oregon is thankfully very straightforward. Its license plate is pale purple and blue with a bright green fir tree in the center. Blurred out, it's very distinct. Pennsylvania is another simple one. The standard plate has a dark blue stripe on top and a yellow one on the bottom. It looks like this blurred out on Street View. Rhode Island keeps things straightforward too. Their license plate has been this plain wave design since 1996. When it's blurred, keep an eye out for that gray and blue swoosh pattern. It can sometimes be tricky to catch. South Carolina's newer license plate, introduced in 2016, has a navy blue stripe at the bottom with a palmetto silhouette in the middle. When blurred out, look for that dark blue on the bottom and in the middle. From 2008 to 2016, this was the standard plate, and it looks like this blurred out. Again, be careful not to mix it up with the new Georgia plate. South Dakota's two common license plates both have Mount Rushmore, just in different colors. The 2016 and on plate has it in a tan color with blue sky, which looks like this blurred out. Before that, Mount Rushmore was in white, still with a blue sky. When blurred out, the red text is a very good thing to look for. Tennessee is a nice and simple one for us. Its license plate features green hills and a white sky. It looks pretty distinct when blurred, but it can be a little hard to spot sometimes. Keep a close eye out for those green blurs. Texas is another state with two common license plates. The newest plate is white with black text, which usually just looks white when blurred, but you can sometimes make out the black text, especially in Gen 4 coverage. The older Texas plate is a vibrant sky and cloud scene with red in the corner. Blurred out, the red is a good thing to keep an eye out for. Utah has three common license plates. The most common one is this one featuring delicate arch, and when blurred out, it's extremely distinctive, especially with that patch of orange. Another fairly common plate has a skiing design with an orangey-brown stripe on top. It looks like this blurred out. Lastly, you can sometimes find this mostly white plate with the US flag on the left, which looks like this when blurred. Vermont is very simple and very easy to remember. The license plate is a solid bright green, which is very distinct and easy to spot. Virginia has white license plates with dark blue text. These can be pretty tricky to identify when blurred out, but thanks to it being one of the only southern states with front plates, you can usually decide on Virginia based on that and landscape. Look for the faint blue hue on the blurred out plates as well. Washington's plates are pretty recognizable, with a blue Mount Rainier graphic and Washington in red. When blurred out, you can usually see the blue mountain and occasionally the red text. West Virginia plates are very simple, with a navy blue stripe on top and West Virginia in yellow text. When blurred out, it looks almost identical to the Nebraska plate, so don't get them confused. Wisconsin also has this pretty plain design, with Wisconsin written in bright red and a little green farm scene in the top right corner. You can usually see the red text and sometimes the farm when blurred, and be warned, this plate can sometimes look like the current Ohio license plates. Wyoming, our final state, has two common plates on Street View. The newer one, from 2015, has a mountain and lake scene. Blurred out, it looks like this. Note that it's fairly similar to nearby state plates, such as North Dakota or Nevada, so be careful with these. The older Wyoming plate is a little more unique, with blue shaded mountains and green grass at the bottom. It looks like this when blurred out. Okay, that's all 50 states done. That was a lot of information all at once, so thank you to anyone who watched that the whole way through. The best way to get better at license plates is to just practice, and my state-specific clues map features many of these license plates as well. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in episode 3 soon.